Nemesis asked when the briefing ended. Shern, you brought up a point that was the metaphoric elephant in the room. It is imperative we seek DNA samples from both Francesca and her daughter in order to prove one way or other if Xavier Shakervella and Valerie Pharaoh Olin are a genetic match to either or both women. If so, I'm sure each of you understands what this would mean for our investigation into AMPS. The acronym represented one of the largest human trafficking rings in the world, one whose origins traced back decades, beginning with the man we believed had founded the organization, Salvatore Kronos Ravdos. Based on Pharaoh's assertion right before she died, he was her father. DNA testing showed Xavier was her brother, which meant they also shared a mother. Could either Francesca or her daughter be that woman? My gut told me it wasn't Nonna, as everyone referred to Francesca, simply due to her age. But I had an equally difficult time believing Charlene could be, given the woman we sought was a criminal mastermind, and she was the least likely person to hold such power. The agents already on the island of Gozo, where Francesca and Charlene are believed to be, are both familiar to our suspects. Shern, you are not. Neither is Michelangelo. I'm sending the two of you in undercover to get close enough to the women to obtain something we can use for DNA testing. What about me? I asked. It isn't necessary for you to travel with them. I'd prefer to do so. Michelangelo is needed in Tropea. Nemesis cocked her head. Very well. Speak with Poseidon and Ares. Delphino and Atticus are the agents I mentioned. The three of you can determine whether you want them to remain. I nodded, thankful Nem didn't confront me as to why I insisted on deploying on this op. If she had, I don't know what I would have said. My request was illogical. As much as I knew I had to keep my hands off Shern, I also knew being away from her for any length of time was something I couldn't endure. Magnet? I heard her say in a voice laden with insecurity. Come with me. Her round eyes belied the fake smile she plastered on her face when I led her into the solarium where she and I worked most often. Listen. Did I do something wrong? Or is it you are afraid I will? She asked before I could allay her fears. My reason for telling Nemesis I would deploy to Gozo in Michelangelo's place has nothing to do with you. I lied. What I said next, though, was the truth. This op belongs to the Albanian task force, and thus it's my decision who deploys. This investigation could lead us to finding the person represented by the A in the AMPS acronym. If successful, it will result in our taking the organization down once and for all. I understand. This is important, Shern. I cannot stress it enough. This is our team's op, and I'll be damned if I'll let it fall apart before we get started. In fact, if I deem it necessary, I'll call for Rogue and Aaron from our team to replace Delphino and Atticus, the agents already deployed. While she accepted my response, her skepticism regarding her abilities remained apparent. What could I say to convince her otherwise? Nothing. I could hardly tell her I got up every morning anxious to see her. I couldn't admit that since she arrived in Sheer, I woke at 0500, telling myself to wait until at least 6 to get out of bed, when prior to her being on my task force, I could easily have slept until 9. For God's sake, in just the time we both slept, I missed her. What would days apart be like? But could I confess any of it? Of course I couldn't. You're certain? She said in the accent that drove me mad with desire. Maybe some would have preferred the softer tones of Italian or French. Maybe before I met Shern, I would have too. Now I found no other intonation as sexy as hers. I thought I might start putting notes together. Nemesis wasn't specific about when when we'll leave for Gozo, said Shern. I would predict as soon as travel arrangements can be made. Is that something I should take care of? I fielded such questions day in, day out. If there is something you should be doing, as your commander, I will be the one to assign the task. Am I understood? She lowered her gaze. Yes, sir. Shern. As I'd told her many times over, I expected her to look at me when we were conversing. When her cheeks flushed, I wanted to cup her face and tell her it was all right, that, more than her to be subservient, I longed to stare deeply into her cinnamon-coloured doe eyes. I've never been to Malta. What's it like? She asked, thankfully shifting our conversation in a more positive direction. Italy, the southern part, as far as a similar country. It's also a lot like Greece. The water